On our 11th day in Japan, we went back to Harajuku in the morning because I wanted to go shopping again. And also because we were going to TeamLabs in the afternoon and we had a special time we had to go. I definitely recommend, if you are interested in going to TeamLabs, getting your ticket at least a couple weeks ahead of time. Just because they have days that are completely booked out and it's a little bit difficult to get the exact time you want if you're on a strict schedule. However, we didn't mind having a more flexible day, so I really enjoyed getting to come back and see some really cool cotton candy be made. I didn't realize how big the cotton candy would be, but normally it takes maybe 5 minutes to eat a cotton candy, because if that's if you're savoring it, right? Like, if you're taking it piece by piece. This thing took a solid 15 minutes between two people. Halfway through I had to give up and I was like, buddy, I need your help. We have to get to the finish line together. But it was still very fun, and it was only $5. One of the best things about Japan, I think, is that everything especially food, is really affordable. Next, we stopped by one of the juice stores that we had walked by the day before, and they had basically homemade soda drinks, which I really loved because the little cups were so cute, and I love that you could actually see the whole thing being made. It definitely makes you feel like you're being healthier, even if you're not technically. Although I choose to believe that I was super healthy all of Japan because we walked an average of 10 kilometers a day without realizing it. I mean, I realized that my feet were killing me, but you would walk a lot during Japan, so every time I had, maybe I can get a cake, and in my head I'd go, but no, you have to watch your carbohydrates because you're diabetic, and then, this other little demon on my shoulder would be like, but you're gonna walk it off. Those calories, those carbohydrates, they don't count, and that's how I ended up spending most of my budget on food. True story. When it got close to time for our TeamLabs reservation, we took the train over. It was really on its own. There wasn't a whole bunch of things to do nearby, but we had seen a lot of pictures and videos on Instagram regarding it, and it's basically an interactive museum experience. So you're not just looking at stuff, you're touching things, you're feeling things, you're experiencing things. And of course, there's a lot of really cool photo opportunities. So after coming in, they ask you to take your shoes off and put them in a locker along with any belongings besides basically your phone. They basically lead you off to the first part of the exhibit, which you start walking down this dark hallway, and then there is water on carpet. You're not expecting this. Water on carpet's a weird sensation. You continue walking, and you're basically going up a ramp with water flowing down. It really feels interesting. It made me feel very introspective. I was giggling. I was sitting there this feels really weird. This feels really zen, but it was a very interesting experience, one that I really liked because you have to think about the experience. You're not just looking at a picture. As you're going to the top, you're wondering, what does it mean to be going through this water that's rushing down to this waterfall that's very thin and, has light coming down and everything. I really enjoyed this exhibit. Probably not the most, but one of my favorite parts. When you enter out of that, there's a room full of towels where you can dry your feet, as well as an area where you can read more about how the exhibit works. And then you're off through another dark hallway. It's not as dark as my camera makes it look. I just don't have very good night vision on it. But essentially, every exhibit is linked through dark hallways, and there will be warnings outside of some. The second one that came after this was a room of plushy floor. So imagine you're walking on bean bags. It's a lot harder than you would think. You can't see it super well because the whole room is very dark, which adds to the sensory aspect of it because you're walking in the dark on an unfamiliar texture that behaves oddly. Definitely fun. It reminded me of when I was a nanny and I'd bring kids to indoor play centers, and it's I'm too old for this. I'm 21, but I'm too old for this. Another part that I really, really enjoyed. I just really love the tactile experience of every part of this museum. Upon exiting that area, we were able to read another thing telling us about it, and then we headed into my favorite part, which was this bright light-up room of lights. lights and mirrors, and it reminded me of this exhibit I saw way back in like high school that was very similar, where it was a hall of mirrors and lights by some Japanese artist, and that was one of the reasons why I really fell in love with art. As you can imagine, this part of the museum was very crowded with people who wanted to take pictures. The good thing was, it's basically like a mirror maze, and there's a lot of spaces where you can take pictures without being in someone else's picture or having them in yours. And it also gives you plenty of time to linger. You can stay in there for a while and just look. You have plenty of time to really experience it and take pictures, which is something that I really appreciate because I, for one, always like to balance being able to record while also experiencing where I'm at. You know, I don't ever want to get so caught up in recording that I'm not getting a chance to really enjoy the experience itself. Overall, one of my favorite rooms, if not the favorite, of the whole experience. Of course, after this, another dark, creepy hallway. And this one led back to another hallway full of water. I really, really liked the experience of walking in the water. I do say, they warn you not to wear like pants or like clothing, like if you don't want to get upskirted by the mirror floors. So do keep that in mind if you go. Wear shorts or wear a dress with shorts underneath it. And definitely not anything too long. But this led to the second water room, which I also really enjoy. As you can tell, I love this experience a lot because this felt like being in a dream of some sort, or maybe being on like LSD. I've never done LSD, but I imagine having the floating fish of color that has to be somewhat drug-like, right? I really like this part because with the water, it really gave a sense of aliveness, of life to this room. It didn't just feel like laziness, you know? I feel like a lot of these exhibits could have been viewed as lazy if they weren't done in the scope and the size that they were. These rooms were all very big. There was always a nice transition between area to area, and the music always was like a soundscape that you got to step into and touch. Again, if you like art museums, this is definitely a must-see, because even with someone who enjoys recording, there's plenty of spaces for experiencing and taking note of where you're at. The next exhibit was a balloon room, which is what it sounds like. The whole room is full of these huge blown up balls, and the lights change color every so often. So most of them are kind of suspended above you by like the way they're stacked, and there are a couple on the ground that you can move around and, you know, kind of mess with. The ground itself is mirrored, and this allowed for a lot of really cool photo opportunities, as well as just like some really interesting views. Like, it definitely makes you think, because this is like being in an abstract painting. It's like being in an abstract piece of art. It's really hard to put any type of value judgment on this kind of room. It's hard to describe it in metaphor to anything. I guess if it was a little bit less crowded, then I could say it was almost heaven-like. But overall, this room was just really cool because it was like obviously a photo op room. Like, a lot of these are made for photo ops, but it was one that I really enjoyed spending some time in because interesting shapes. The next room was also really interesting because it was a dome-shaped room with a projector, basically doing this huge abstract floral arrangement around you. And so walking in, it really feels awe-inspiring. It's encompassing. The music itself, it's like a soundscape with a visual component, and a lot of people sat down on the floor, laid down, and watched the flowers for a while. We certainly did, because even though it's obviously abstract, there's no narrative, there's no real meaning to be gleaned from it. It was very, very relaxing and just something that was like, you wouldn't expect it. None of these exhibits were things that I could accurately expect when I came into the room. Like, before the exhibit, I didn't do research beyond I saw a few pictures. Coming in, I never knew what was around the corner because each thing was so different from the other, except there would be like this continual theme of sound, touch, and light. And I think even for someone who doesn't like art, even children could really, really enjoy this experience just because it makes you sit and realize, wow, that is something. The museum was divided into two parts. One was water, which we just went through, and the other one was garden. So after we left this scene, we walked out to the other side of the building. This was definitely a lot smaller, and I still think the room was very fun. Like, there was mist and steam and these weird giant metallic eggs, and it was, they gave us little slippers to walk outside with, and I think, with the mirrored wall and everything, it even appeared larger than it was. But there was only two exhibits for this part. There was the egg room, and then there was the orchid room. Still, this was a really cool place to take pictures, and just to look and, imagine, this is the kind of thing that I would like to see more of in science fiction. Give me interesting things to look at, interesting alien planets, because I could definitely stare at a movie set in a field something like this. The orchid room was another very beautiful experience. So basically they have all these flowers that are still living, tied to strings that raise and fall. So when we came in, they were down, so I had to crawl under it a little bit. But then once we got in, I decided to basically just sit down and just watch them come up and down. This was one of the only timed areas in the museum. You could get back in line if you wanted to, but you're only in there for about 5 minutes before they call in the next group. So it's definitely not, I can see why people would definitely spend a long time in here, because this is the perfect place for photos. Not only is there great lighting, there are beautiful flowers everywhere and a mirror floor. And as you can see, I tried to record the flowers coming up and down. It was very subtle, and I don't think I got a very good view of it. But this whole room was very photogenic, and something that I can definitely see being, if you're the kind of person who likes taking photos for your trips, this is a place that you would definitely want to. All in all, I really, really enjoyed TeamLabs, and if I ever see another installation of theirs in any city I ever go to, I'm 100% heading there, because they have completely gotten me with this idea of an interactive museum. As someone who really loves art but often doesn't have the patience for basically just staring at the painting, sometimes I really think that you just having an interactive aspect is always better to me, in the same way that, being able to interact with nature is a lot more interesting than just sitting in a park. So after all of that, we were pretty close to the side of town where we went to the Takoyaki Museum, and we went back to the arcade section where you could use up some coins, because I still have some. It's been literally about a month, and I still have coins from Japan, because you get change so much more. I never really spend cash in the US, and I realize in other countries I do, especially here. So we played this game for 10 yen, which is like a dime. And this won a prize, and that was the extent of going back to that part of the museum. Then we went on to a indoor amusement park. See, I didn't really care for the indoor amusement park, which is why I don't have much photos of it, because there wasn't a lot to take photos of. And also a lot of it was in Japanese, so it wasn't, obviously it's in Japan, but a lot of it was in Japanese, and therefore, there were story-based things that weren't as interesting to us because we couldn't understand the story. It's not like going to Disney where you can just kind of ride the rides and not have to understand the context of everything because of the universal language of Disney. And yeah, I would definitely not consider doing an indoor amusement park. I think that wasn't really worth it. Finally, we decided to go for a walk outside to go towards that tower right there in the distance. A very easy landmark to find, right? Personally, I'm not an architecture I like architecture if it's old, and then I'll be like, ooh, cool, picture, and that's kind of it for me. But we decided to go towards it because we really had a very loose itinerary for this trip, and it was mostly just look at the thing. So we did. We walked and we looked at the thing. All in all, creating a really fun night that went on pretty long, and I'm really happy to say that I feel like we covered a lot in this one day without feeling rushed. I think some of the earlier days in the trips, because we had a more strict schedule, I definitely felt just a little bit tired out, especially because I was coming from working very hard to this one trip, and then you have jet lag and whatnot. So having a lot of days like these where we just have, these are the points we want to hit, we don't really have a strict schedule, made for a very enjoyable trip. I definitely think if I was to come back again, definitely hitting whatever new TeamLabs thing they have around, and most likely coming back to this area during the day.